The return of sacred space in a chaotic world. The modern world is increasingly perceived as a space of continuous noise, flows of information, events, anxieties, and obligations. Global interconnectedness, which not long ago appeared as a miracle of civilization, has unexpectedly revealed its reverse side. It has turned everyday life into a zone of constant overload. People live as though running a marathon no one announced, but everyone participates in. In this striving to move forward, we have lost something essential: the ability to find and create sacred spaces, both inner and outer, where restoration, silence, meaning, and connection with the deep self, and with something beyond the individual, are possible. The idea of a sacred space is not necessarily tied to religion. It can refer to something much broader: an internal subjective state, a place in the world where a person is not required to perform, react, strive, or prove anything, a place where one can simply be. The return of such spaces is not a luxury or an elusive dream, but a real spiritual and psychological necessity. It is not merely rest. It is the restoration of wholeness and meaning in conditions of chaos. But what makes a space sacred? How can we recover it while living in an era when even our own thoughts seem to be for sale? Why do some people instinctively search for islands of silence, while others refuse to recognize that their inner chaos stems from the absence of this very foundation? Answers to these questions matter not only individually but also for understanding the fate of modern culture as a whole. What is a sacred space? Experience, not geography. To understand the role sacred spaces play in today's world, we must first define the term. Historically, the sacred was contrasted with the profane, the everyday world of labor, survival, and necessity. The sacred implied a different quality of presence, a different mode of perception. Ancient temples were placed in special locations, and rituals required stepping out of the mundane. A person had to enter a space in which they could sense themselves not merely as a social being, but as part of the cosmos, part of something greater. Today, sacred space is not necessarily a physical location. It is a state of being, a particular way of existing. It may arise in a purposefully created environment, a room, a garden, a temple, a studio. In a ritual, morning silence, tea preparation, journaling. In an action, slow, mindful, not aimed at productivity. In relationships, deeply honest, free of masks. In nature, where one feels part of the living world. A sacred space is the point at which the rush of thought ceases and presence begins. It is where the need to play roles disappears. It is the pause between inhalation and exhalation, in which what is usually inaudible becomes audible. People return again and again to sacred spaces because they possess a particular quality. They gather the scattered mind, returning a person to their center. In them, chaos collapses, not the outer chaos, but the inner one. The chaotic world as a factor of inner disintegration. To understand why restoring sacred space has become urgent, we must see the scale of the chaos in which modern people live. Chaos is not a single phenomenon, but a constellation of interwoven processes. 1. Informational noise. We live in an era of endless data flow. A person today consumes more information daily than ancestors did in months or sometimes years. It is impossible to absorb this stream, to categorize it, or respond to it adequately. The mind exists in a state of constant alarm because it was not built for such rapid switching. In this mode, there is little room left for silence. 2. The cult of busyness. Modern culture elevates busyness to the rank of virtue. If a person is not working, they must justify it. If they are working, they must work more. Even rest must be productive. Travel must be event-filled. Hobbies should become side incomes, and personal life must yield measurable benefits. In this cult of efficiency, there is no place for sacred space because it cannot be measured and produces no visible results. 3. Separation from nature. Urban environments create the illusion that humans are autonomous from nature, yet in reality they sever an ancient connection. Nature is one of the oldest sources of sacred space. Forests, water, mountains, gardens, all of these once reminded people of eternal cycles and helped them feel their place in the cosmos. Losing nature means losing one of the simplest and deepest forms of silence. 4. Loss of rituals. Modern culture dismantles rituals, replacing them with chaotic sequences of tasks. Rituals provide structure, a format for presence, a way to create a stable inner space. Without them, a person loses the mechanism that would allow a regular return to awareness. 5. Inner disintegration. All the above leads to inner chaos. A person may live in a beautiful, orderly home, have a stable income, be socially successful, and yet experience total inability to find peace, quiet, or meaning. Inner chaos is the state in which one loses their center of gravity, and actions become automatic. In this condition, a person ceases to be the author of their own life. Why do we need sacred space? Psychological and spiritual dimensions. 1. The need for wholeness. The human mind requires periodic withdrawal from the stream. It is impossible to think, feel, create, or build anything meaningful under constant overload. Sacred space restores wholeness, the ability to perceive life not as fragments, but as a unified flow. 2. The need for meaning. Orientation. Sacred spaces are the zones where a person returns to their deepest values. In a chaotic world, values dissolve, replaced by imposed desires and social expectations. Silence allows one to hear what truly matters. 3. Psychological regulation. Neuroscience shows that periods of mindful rest activate the brain's default mode network, which governs self-reflection, memory, emotion processing, and decision-making. Sacred space is not an abstraction, it is a physiological necessity. 4. Spiritual depth. Sacredness always involves sensing connection to something greater: God, nature, art, love, ethics, science, the cosmos. The specific form varies, but the experience of greatness is universal. It provides a sense of meaning and belonging. 5. A space of healing. Internal wounds, emotional, psychological, existential, require time and stillness. Nothing heals in the midst of noise. Sacred space is where inner restoration becomes possible. Forms of sacred space in the modern world. A sacred space need not be a temple. It may take many forms, each meaningful in its own way. 1. Natural spaces. Forests, water, mountains, gardens, even a small park can be sacred. Nature asks nothing of us but presence. 2. The home as sacred space. A dwelling can be a refuge if it contains a corner free from noise, obligations, and expectations. 3. Inner space of silence. Meditation, breathing practices, reading, deep listening, all create an inner sacred space available at any time. 4. Creative space. Creativity is one of the most powerful escapes from chaos. A painter's studio, a writer's desk, a musician's room. These are worlds being created, not consumed. 5. Relational space. Certain people make us feel authentic simply by being with them. Such relationships are sacred spaces too. How to restore sacred space. A practical perspective. 1. Creating islands of silence. Silence is the first and primary form of sacred space. It may be 5 minutes in the morning, an hour in the evening, a solitary walk, or a phone switched off. 2. Reclaiming rituals. Rituals bridge chaos and meaning. Morning breathing, journaling, evening tea, a Sunday walk. All of these create structure. 3. Intentional space design. Even a small corner arranged with intention can become sacred. A candle, a stone, a book, a plant, an icon, a photograph, symbols of what matters. 4. Purifying the information space. Curating information is the first step toward reclaiming peace. 5. Slowing down. Sacred space begins where haste ends. 6. Creativity. Creation returns to a person the feeling of personal agency and meaning. 7. Embodied practices. Yoga, walking, dance, and breathwork root a person in reality. 8. Re-evaluating values. Sacred space cannot be restored while living entirely by others' expectations. One must define personal priorities. Sacred space as a response to the culture of chaos. Restoring sacred space is not only an individual practice. It challenges a culture built on overload, consumption, acceleration, and noise. By creating sacred spaces, people resist dehumanization, recover the capacity to feel, protect the human within themselves, restore value to what cannot be measured. Every sacred space is an act of quiet resistance. Conclusion: the space we create. Sacred space is not a gift of fate and not a privilege of the chosen. It is something a person creates with conscious attention. Even in the most chaotic world, there is the possibility to stop, breathe deeper, and look at life differently. Sacred space is not a place a person escapes to. It is the place from which a person returns renewed. The return of sacred space is the return to oneself.